In this mini video lecture, I shall talk about the most frequently used function provided by the C standard library for printing output onto the screen. So if you say here, scanf and printf are probably the most extensively used functions in a C program, which are provided by the C standard library and declared in the header file stdio.h. Between scanf and printf, printf would be more used compared to scanf. So first let's try to take a look at a program, try to understand how it's working, and then I'll go ahead about explaining the printf statement. I have declared a variable I of the type integer. That means it's only going to be full numbers, not fractions. The initial value is 100. I have declared a variable called as j of the type float or real number, which can contain fractions like 100.5, 100.6 and so on. Using printf, I am printing value of I is equal to %d and j is equal to %f/n. We'll try to explain each and every point of this printf over the next 5 or 6 minutes. So when you compile this program and you run it, you're going to get something like this. Value of I is 10 and j is 100.60. A real number like j, if you print it like the way I have printed it here, it's going to print the full number, and after the decimal places, it's going to be accurate up to 6 digits. Similar to scanf, whatever is between the double quotes is the control string, okay, and it is used for printing content which is fixed, like value of I equal to, it is going to be printed as it is. This %d and %f are known as the conversion specifiers. %d indicates that I is of the integer type and %f indicates that j is of the real number or floating type of data. Before we talk about other things about printf, let's try to clarify a few things. The first thing about printf is used for printing values which are of data types which are provided by C, like int, float, char, double, long and so on. If you create your own data types, you cannot directly use printf for printing on the screen. Now, just as with scanf, the printf function or C has no idea about what you are printing. For it, data is simply a series of ones and zeros. So according to what your requirements are, if you want an integer to be printed in the control or the format conversion specifier, you will specify %d. If you want a real number or a floating number, you will specify %f. So it is your job to inform C how to make sense of the data. Otherwise, for C, it is simply a series of ones and zeros. So here you need to understand a few things. So when you look at printf, there's a round bracket, ends with a round bracket. This is the format string. So the format string can contain fixed text like value of I is assigned and so on or equal to, as well as it can contain conversion specifiers like %d, %f, %l, %u, %o and so on. Now the format string informs the C how the values of these expression 1, expression 2, expression 3 till expression n are to be interpreted. So this format string can contain conversion specifiers as well as text. Conversion specifiers like %d and %f always begin with the percentage sign. Now, before I go ahead, let me explain to you what you mean by an expression in C in a very simple language. Later on, we will be dealing with expressions a lot when we come to evaluation of expressions using various operators of C. Example of an expression in C. Suppose I have 2 plus 3 into 5. It's going to be 15 plus 2 is going to be 17. This is an example of an expression. It's a combination of constants and operators. Just the number 2 is also an expression in C. It's a constant expression. This is a variable. This is also an expression in C. This is a combination of variables. This is also an expression in C. So an expression can be a constant, it can be a variable, it can be a combination of operators, constants and variables. But there's an important rule about expressions in C. When this expression is evaluated or solved, it must lead to a single value. You cannot have 2 plus 3 into 5 plus x and you do not know what is the value of x. That is not an expression. It has to be resulting in a single value. Here it's a single value. I, in this case, let's say it's 10. That's a single value. This we have not given any values for x, y and a, but if we give values, it will result in a single value. So expression is a combination of variables, constants, operators, the evaluation of which leads to a single value. Now, once we have understood what are expressions, let us try to continue our understanding of printf. So, expressions may contain constants, variables or combinations evaluating to a built-in data type. After evaluating, they should result in a built-in data type of either int, float, character or something like that. Now, if you look at this particular message, at the place where there is 10, there was percentage %d. At the place where there was 100.00, there was percentage %f. Now what this slash n does is, after printing this line, the cursor, the blinking thing comes here. Because it encounters the backslash n, it says, informs the computer, take the cursor to the beginning of the next line. So the cursor will come and blink here. So to understand conversion specifiers, percentage %d is substituted with 10, percentage %f is substituted with 100.00. So exactly at the point where the conversion specifiers occur, the substitution does happen. Now, let's try to understand a little more about printf, because we're going to use it so much that it's a great idea to get an idea of completely about the printf. The reason we use conversion specifiers is because I want to tell I should be printed as an integer and j should be printed as a real number or a floating point number. As I said, percentage %d indicates a decimal integer. Decimal means, don't think of decimal like 1 point. Decimal in C means you're talking about the base 10 system. Okay, so it's in the base 10 system, you're representing the integer, because you can represent octal numbers, you can represent hexadecimal numbers in C. That's why he's clearly said decimal integer. That means a whole number in base 10. All the things you want to print as is without change is enclosed in double quotes. So if you see this, this is enclosed in double quotes. Now, there are a few interesting things with C. What these interesting things are? Let us say I give percentage %d, I say j is equal to, but I forget to put this percentage %f. C will not give you an error. C believes the programmer knows what he or she is doing, so it gives him complete freedom. This can be a problem with beginners because you are not able to manage your freedom well. So it doesn't check the number of conversion specifiers and expressions. So you may not give even 1 percentage %d, 1 percentage %f, but you will still have ij. It will not give you an error. Also, C does not perform any data type checks. What it means is, in place of I, if you had put j here, and in place of j, if you had put I here, you would have got garbage results, but C would have never told you it's an error. Only when you run the program, you would have got wrong output. So what is the moral of the story? Use your freedom judiciously or with a lot of application of mind. It is the programmer's job to make sure that the data type of the variable matches and corresponds to the formatting character. When I put percentage %d here, it's my job to put I, which is of the type integer. If I put percentage %f here, it's my job to put j, which is of the real number type. If I exchange, C doesn't bother, printf doesn't care, you will have a problem when you run the program. So again, job of the programmer to specify the correct conversion specifier as well as the data type. Otherwise, garbage results are printed. This can be explained through the use of a very simple example. So take a look at this first example here. I am saying value of I is percentage %f, j is percentage %d. But I know I is an integer and j is a real number. Okay, so what I have done is I have put I and j as it is. But since this was an integer and this was a real number, So you're going to get garbage output because you forgot to put %d here and %f here. You exchanged it, but you gave ing as they are. So here you will have a problem because C will not bother to tell you this is an error. Only when you run, you will get a garbage output. One more example. Here what I have done here is value of I is %d, j is %f. But I have only given I, forgotten to give comma j. So it will print I correctly as 10. But for j, it will print some garbage or meaningless output. Again, you will not get a warning. So printf is very useful, going to be most frequently used, but it is your job to be careful with how many conversion specifiers you are giving, the type of the conversion specifiers. They should match with the type and number of the expressions or variables after this particular comma. I hope you have understood the working of the printf with this brief talk.